Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Rampton Pava from the SafeStep. Very excited to welcome you all to the fourth instalment in the series that we've been doing with Cameron Stevens, how to include digital to elevate your 2022 safety strategy. So in today's session, Cam is going to explore some simple and effective ways to integrate digital into your safety strategy for the upcoming year and beyond. For those of you who don't know Cameron, he's a health and safety professional dedicated to step-changing health and safety performance with emerging technologies, and is now considered Australia's leading safety technologist. He juggles his time between employer, founder, startup advisor and volunteer roles, all with the relentless pursuit to improve the health and safety of work with technology and innovation. Now, today's session is going to be, somewhat interactive at the beginning, and there will be an opportunity for some Q&A towards the end of the session. And with that, I'll hand over to you, Cam.
Everybody, thanks, Rampton, and it's really great to be here for the final instalment of the four-part series, and we'll do a quick recap of those before we move ahead. Just a very quick show of appreciation to the traditional owners of the land which I'm presenting from today, the Whadjuk Noongar clan, and I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. And again, thank you for everyone who's attending. Clearly you have a desire to want to elevate your strategy for 2022. And let's kick right off. So just a quick overview of the agenda. We're going to unpack a little bit around technology strategy. Quite confident most of you will be very familiar with safety strategy, and we'll look at how they can combine together to look at what I'm calling digital safety strategy, and certainly it doesn't need to be a standalone strategic direction, but we'll unpack that a little bit. And realistically for this session, what I want to focus on the most is where to start, because that's really most of the inbound inquiries I'm getting. A lot of the LinkedIn messages are asking, how do I get started if I want to start being more tech savvy or inject digital into my the way that we do health and safety in our organisation. So that will be the key focus for today. I'll leave you with some resources. I'll talk you through some of the foundational resources that you can go to get started. And then we'll have a Q&A session. So for those of you that are probably already moving through your digital journey, it's probably more of a sense check of where you're at. Hopefully you still get some tips and tricks, but certainly this session today is probably more focused on those that are still a bit bewildered with what's going on and feel quite confused about how to start. So before we kick off, we're just going to grab a quick poll. So hopefully the team that can pop up the poll. And this is actually one of the questions from a survey around sort of baseline understanding of where you're at in your digital strategy. So the question being, the digital investment that your organization makes, has it deliberately taken health and safety into account? And that's a roundabout way of saying, how much involvement does health and safety have in the digital strategy of your organization? Or in other words, in a different way to flip that is, how much have you considered digital in your health and safety strategy? So there's about 30 odd people on the webinar. So hopefully as many people as possible will click that. And I will click it myself, and let's see what we get as the posts come through. So let's see how we go. Maybe an extra 30 seconds or so before we move on. While the poll results are tallying up, let's have a quick overview of the previous sessions that we've had, and a very quick introduction back to me before we move forward. So the four-part webinar series that we've gone through with the SafeStep, part of the Next Step group, is a four-part series where we started off looking at how to make the business case for digital safety investment. And then we looked at a particular technology, wearable computing. And from there, we looked at ethics and responsible innovation. And then today, our final session, wrapping that all together. So it's worthwhile going back and having a look at the link to those previous recordings, because they will tie back up in this session. And you'll be able to get those details. I'm confident they'll be emailed out to you at the end of this session. If this is your first time joining us, thanks again for joining us. This is a quick snapshot on a page of my background. So I'm a chartered safety professional with a original undergrad of physiotherapy, did my master's in human factors, and now working full-time in technology and exploring that nexus where health, safety, and technology meet, and really focused on trying to improve health and safety outcomes with technology. So enough about me, let's get into the nuts and bolts. Now, when it comes to strategy, I'll get you to pop into the chat on a scale of 1 to 10. So 1 being, I haven't thought about it yet, and 10 being, I have my 22 strategy locked and loaded, it's approved, I've got a budget, and I'm just waiting for the calendar to tick over. Where are you at in relation to planning for 2022 and beyond? I'm interested to know, so scale of 1 to 10, if you pop that into the chat, and we'll see how we go. I'm very excited to see that, Lauren, because I know what type of focus your strategy is going to be having as well. Few people that are getting along. Luke is super chill, going to have an awesome holiday period. He's going to be hanging out. Good to see David, Kynan. So most people kind of still figuring out what's going on around those 5s. Nice work, Effie. Okay, thanks for that. So typically, I mean, in my experience in the roles that I've had, safety strategy or health and safety strategy, maybe you do health, safety, environment, quality. It depends on what your remit is, but typically what I'm seeing and what I have designed myself, safety strategy will typically include things that may be anchored to, say, ISO certification. So it would be you're trying to prepare your management system or update your management system to perhaps look at 45001 or maybe now with mental health considerations 45003. I certainly know here in Western Australia there's new regulations coming, so the strategy may be anchored towards trying to prepare for that. Perhaps last year or the last few years you've had some risk areas or hazard categories that need to be addressed, and that might be on the back of incident investigations or actions or audit outcomes. You may be focused on critical control risk areas, so major fatal accident risk potential. Perhaps it's around training and competency or improving leadership or trust. Maybe you're trying to maneuver your management system to be more aligned with, say, a philosophy, new view, HOP as an example. And maybe it's simply just plugging the gaps of the things that you didn't do last year. And I'm certainly confident that everyone will have COVID-19 risk management and vaccination on their portfolio. So that it's highly likely that you'll have a clear understanding of what you want to do and how you want to do it in relation to traditional default practices around health and safety. And my nudge here is, how often have you been doing that? And I certainly know from my experience, it was pretty much an iteration on an iteration of the same thing year on year. And it really didn't look that much different. Maybe it was branded in a different way or communicated in a different way. But fundamentally, I wasn't actually dialing up the ability to truly improve health and safety outcomes at step change level. And the reason why I got into technology full time was because I truly believe that technology has some answers that we haven't looked to explore, and we need to be more strategic around looking at how technology and digital innovation can improve health and safety outcomes. So let's put our hat on as someone that works in information technology or technology CIO, for example, or the technology team in your organization. Let's have a look at typically what their strategy looks like. So their strategies are not too dissimilar in terms of the way that they focus what's going on. So the key categories that I'm seeing are organizations wanting to try and certify to ISO 27001, which is the cybersecurity standard, just in the way that organizations are trying to align themselves to 45001 or 45003. And to do that, they need to look at policy, they need to look at training and procedures, they need to look at competency in the organization around cyber. And I'm confident you would have already been the recipient of that over the last few years. If you can hear my 3-month-old son crying, I can only apologize, #working from home. So in terms of other categories that you'll see on a technology organization strategy is shifting to the cloud. So cloud computing, and what that is you're taking the typical way to manage data, and usually that would be, and has historically been, what they call on-premise, which is where the servers that capture all of the information and store and distribute the information are located within the physical infrastructure of the organization. And that used to be a cybersecurity benefit. Now, with cybersecurity happening in the cloud, we're seeing organizations migrate their data to the cloud, and this enables mobility and enables people to work from anywhere, and therefore the definition of the workplace becomes dissolved, and effectively we can work from different places throughout the world and also within the operational footprint. So we're seeing people start to execute work and interact with digital systems while they're actually performing work. And for those of you that have seen the wearable computing webinar, where we talked about this technology, the rear head mounted tablet as an example of wearable computing getting you right out to those edges of where work's performed. So we're seeing mobility strategy, so laptops, smart devices, handhelds, wearables. We're seeing people look at their connectivity. So private 5G networks are starting to be designed. We're starting to see private mobile networks being designed. We will often see technology strategy include things like looking at enterprise resource planning solutions like SAP, IBM Maximo, large platforms, Salesforce, those types of tech applications that house all of the data. And they may also be asked by the health and safety team to look at the EHS management system software. And I know I can see David Irvin from Enablon on the call, and I think there's a couple of other people that work in that EHS management system space. So the tech teams may have an interface with health and safety at that interface. They also might be having a look at connected work as a deliberate strategy to improve the way that organizations are extending their ability to work out to the edges of the organization, and there may be an automation strategy as well. So those are typically what sit on the tech strategy of organizations. So we have the safety strategy and the technology strategy, and I don't really look that much different, but I'm going to ask the question now in the chat as well. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much involvement do you have in the design of the technology strategy? So 1 being I have none, or 0 being I have none, and 10 being I'm fully integrated. I have regular catch-ups. We have a technology safety council in our organization. If anybody can pop into the chat where they're at. Wow, James, I would love to meet you and learn about how you are doing that. So we've got a 10 and a, oh, Lauren, I don't believe that. I'm confident there's conversations going on that line. But as expected, we're seeing people sort of 5 and below. There you go, nice and low. Ramjan or Luke, do we have the poll results from the first question?
Luke, do we have those results? Yep, there we are.
Okay, that's really interesting. So I'm not sure if people can see that, but in terms of the digital investment has deliberately taken safety into account. 64% of people say agree that when people are doing these things, so migration to cloud, cybersecurity, mobility, connectivity, looking at apps, looking at how you're visualizing data, that safety has been considered and deliberately taken into account. I wonder if the way that I frame that, whether or not that would change the poll result, but I'll take everybody's word for it. So 64% agree that people are deliberately focusing on safety with their digital investments. So well done. It's not what I expected. I thought it would be a little bit less. So what is digital safety strategy then? And look, it's a moniker that I give to the combined, dedicated, focused alignment of technology and safety strategy. So it's a strategic direction, purposeful collaboration between tech and safety teams. And the focus is really just improving workplace health and safety outcomes through the responsible implementation of digital transformation in an organization. So it doesn't need to be a standalone strategic direction, just like business strategy is the amalgamation of all of the different strategic approaches to the way organizations are doing their business. Okay, so it makes sense, I guess, to the majority of you that it makes sense to inject digital into safety or be more strategically focused around that intersection between safety and technology. So how do I start? And I believe there are three, or there's probably four areas to look at. So first of all is to look at yourself and how ready are you? So doing a readiness assessment for yourself. What is your mindset like? What is your digital literacy like? How are you feeling about your competency around being able to deliver? That then extends to the team. So how is your team organized, arranged, and set up to be able to deliver as well? And how is your organization ready? Are they, do you believe that they're going to accept the change, the changes that you're proposing? Do they require some additional nurturing around mindset shift, acceptance of technological shift? What is their current state and what influence do you have on that? Just like you would be thinking around that in the way that you influence safety in your organization. So the best place to start, so I had developed my own approach to assessing readiness. And very recently, in the last month, the National Safety Council, as part of their Work to Zero technology transformation, and yes, the name is polarizing. Work to Zero has connotations that I won't go into in this. I'll let you debate to your heart's content in other forums. Name aside, the Work to Zero forum from the National Safety Council, the US National Safety Council, worked with DECRA to pull together a really neat assessment for you to have a look at your digital safety technology readiness. Thank you, Gemma. And please review the recording or get in touch with me if you would like to chat about this further. So these are the types of questions that are in the questionnaire, in the Safety Tech Readiness questionnaire. I won't read them out, but you can see them on the screen. And there's about maybe 10 questions, and it enables you to figure out where on a pathway you sit currently. And it's a good way to give you a line in the sand right now for 2022 where you're at, and then potentially look to climb that ladder over the next 2 to 3 to 5 years. So let's have a quick look. That's where you can find the digital readiness assessment. It is one of those requirements to pop in your details. It will then ask you, so once you've popped your details in, typical details you need to put in to get a form, you will be asked to then fill out a readiness questionnaire, and then you'll get access to the white paper document. And I don't, I endorse this as a first step, but it's not the only way to go about doing this. And I don't believe that this ladder, the incremental steps actually how things work. It's far more messy, and you're going through these cycles, and it will depend on which part of the organization you're talking about. It might be different operations or geographies or cultural contexts that have different sort of heat maps around this. So I don't believe that you can say, we are an observing safety technology organization and we're going to go to experimenting. You might already have some really well deployed technologies who are already doing a transformational change right at the top of the ladder. So I think this step ladder approach is probably not that appropriate for safety innovation and technology deployment, because all different technologies are so different. Artificial intelligence, for example, you might be observing, and rightly so, whereas for automation in the rail sector of your mining organization, you're already transforming. So take this with a grain of salt, but it's a good way to understand roughly where your organization is at, and you can apply that to individual and team. So let's have a look at the individual now and where you can get started, or my advice of where to get started to sort of understand where you're at personally, and you can then extrapolate that out to your teams. So there's some technology topics, there's mindset topics, and there's digital skills, which are sort of digital transformation skills that run across the board. These are the areas where I suggest you start. There are far more things to look at, but these are probably the most high value impact. And you'll see things like augmented and virtual reality. They don't sit on the where to start list. These are foundational technology topics to look at, which will enable you to be able to look at all of the different emerging technology trends going on. I suggest you first understand connectivity. So connectivity is Wi-Fi and mobile connectivity. So what that enables is it enables you to capture data anywhere in your organization, regardless of where you are. There's satellite connectivity. There's things called private long-term evolution networks, which are about $3 million in organizations are investing in to have control over their own network. We've got 5G coming. There's something called Wi-Fi 6. And what you'll find is your technology teams will be dabbling around connectivity right now. And your ability to influence the direction of what they're doing with connectivity and protecting your health and safety risks, the value that you're protecting at risk, the high risk activities. If you put it very simply, if I don't have connectivity at somewhere where we perform a high risk, a fatal risk, then how am I going to get real-time intelligence to be able to affect change? How am I going to be able to do a real-time investigation when something goes wrong? How am I going to be able to manage and communicate and transfer knowledge with people when they're physically working there if I don't have the ability to connect with them? So connectivity is really, really important, and I think something that you should learn about and understand what your organization is doing around connectivity. The second sort of technology bucket is mobility, and that's your ability to get out of the office. And that enables your health and safety strategy to be able to understand work at the front line. Now, you can't understand work at the front line if you don't have connectivity. You can't understand work at the front line if you don't have mobile interfaces to be able to interact with what's going on at what we call the edge. So the edge is beyond the office and out to the edges of where work are being performed. So the word edge gets used a lot in the technology sphere. So understand your connectivity, look at your mobility strategy. So is it smartphones, laptops? Is it Apple devices or Android devices? Are they wearable? Are they voice activated? What are they, and how can they inform how you can improve your health and safety outcomes? The next one is data, understanding how data is captured. So where it's captured from, how it's captured, and then how it's structured. So data that you capture from a sensor in an organization might be a wearable sensor for musculoskeletal risk disorder management, or it may be a sensor around temperature to enable you to understand fatigue or thermal stress, or it could be around vibration to know how long, look at your maintenance strategy. Capturing data from those types of sensors is relatively straightforward. Capturing data that you need for your organization to understand leadership and trust, for example, might be quite different. And how you organize that data, how you structure that data will determine how you can analyze that data and draw insights. So understanding a very basic knowledge of where your data, how your data is captured, how it's transferred, and how it can be communicated and displayed back to your organization to create meaningful insights is really important. And that's the traditional understanding of those EHS management system softwares that you see. There's many of them, and they all have different options that can improve your ability to capture and consume and understand data. The next part is emerging, and it is artificial intelligence and machine learning, the ability for your systems, your computer systems, to be able to do more analysis on the data than you can. So rather than looking at data from your that's been captured, that has the potential to give you insights on health and safety risk management, computers are doing some of that thinking for you, playing you back insights. It may be a system that enables your workers to intuitively interact with your safety management system. And that might be in the form of something like a chatbot. And we do see some really interesting technologies coming out to do that right now. So they are 4 technology topics I suggest you start with to get a surface level knowledge of what's going on. And they are all Googleable, very easy to kind of get foundational knowledge on those particular topics. The digital skills, so the more, I guess, pervasive skills that go across the board, that aren't just specifically technologies, they're more skills that enable successful digital transformation. Those are mostly centered around change management and won't differ too much from what you're already doing if you are trying to innovate in health and safety. And so Nicole Copeland, who's at Wood, who's doing some excellent stuff on Agile, and same with Sarah Cascaden at Amazon. There's some great people out there doing awesome stuff around the use of human-centered design. So design thinking, rapid prototyping and iteration to enable you to do piloting and test and iterate and rapidly continue to test and improve technology deployments. And so human-centered design as a foundational core skill, so understanding the user, understanding the personas of your organization, and then being able to design solutions that have the human in the center. Agile project management, rather than your traditional waterfall project management approach, being comfortable with being uncomfortable and being very focused around rapid iteration, cyclic change, try this, test, repeat, continuous improvement. It's really that rapid iteration of and being very comfortable around that. And most importantly is understanding what a requirement is and documenting requirements. And that's a whole philosophy in itself. But a requirement to document a requirement from a digital standpoint is a skill. So I'll give you a very quick example. If I want to select a health and safety management system software, and I need to be able, because I haven't got my connectivity sorted, I need to be able to capture a certain type of data on a smartphone when there is no internet. So the requirement is I need to capture photos on my smartphone when there's no internet, and when I get back to an internet connection, they will upload into Microsoft Stream or OneDrive. That's my requirement. So it's now I can split that up into little requirements. So that might be my technology needs to integrate with Microsoft OneDrive. My photos need to automatically upload to Microsoft OneDrive. That's a requirement. I need to be able to capture information on smartphones. So that means there has to be an application or a mobile interface. So that's a requirement. And I need to be able to capture information when I don't have an internet connection. That's a requirement. So being able to document those requirements very, very clearly so that when you speak with your technology vendor, you can tell them the requirements, they can clearly understand them, and they can let you know whether they can or they can't, And if they can't, what it's going to cost and how long, so that then you can be far more strategic with your deployment. And your organization will be far more happy that you actually provided them with a human-focused solution that met the requirements that the organization needed. So they're the digital skills. Those are enough to start with. And what kind of, I guess, brings these together is having an agile mindset. And that's a hard one for me to describe, but effectively it's about being very uncomfortable with being uncomfortable. Having an open mind and being able to accept the fact that things are changing. And what you designed for January may get disrupted, but being able to demonstrate that agility in your mind and go, what, that's no problem, or I've got new information, I'm happy to iterate, I'm happy to continue to do the word of 2020 and beyond, which is pivot. I'm happy to pivot out into something completely different, and I'm okay with that. That's roughly agility and agile mindset. It can be looked at in many different ways, but that's a simple way to think about it. The last thing that needs to underpin and frame what you're doing is ethics and responsible innovation, which is the term I call it. So your organization will have values, and you should have also a set of personal values around how you believe and think about technology, and also about the way that you behave in your organization around sustainability, around diversity. And your strategic implementation of technology should not waver from those values. So responsible innovation is understanding that, and go and have a watch of the ethics presentation that I did on September 30 as part of this 4-part series to get a little bit more information on that. So we've talked about digital strategy and the differences between tech and safety strategy. We've talked about where to start, so philosophically. So where do we actually go from here? So my suggestion is that, and this is the little acronym I've got here, TOIL, is actually quite relevant because it does take effort to do this. But I would suggest you have a look at your, so if you, depending on where you're at, and for those of you that are on the scale of 10, we've totally aligned in relation to your digital strategy, then perhaps get in touch with me and I can give you some examples of where some of the really, the organizations that are accelerating, I can give you some tips and guidance on what's next after those foundational skills. But in terms of starting off, have a go at the readiness assessment. And TOIL stands for team, organization, individual, and leaders. So do a readiness assessment, the best of your capability around yourself, so the individual, the team and teams that you work in, the organization as a whole, and then the leadership, because fundamentally, as with health and safety, if your leaders aren't talking the talk, walking the walk, providing the relevant resources financially and people and otherwise to get, and they're aligned and congruent with a North Star around digital transformation for health and safety outcomes, then you're not going to really get anywhere. I would then suggest, so once you've had a bit of a readiness assessment, is go and build a relationship with IT as a dedicated task, as an actual strategic pillar in your strategy. And that might be the only thing you do this year, is get to learn more about what IT are doing. So information communication technologies or operational technology teams, however your team is structured, learn about it, become intimately familiar with them, be a team, and effectively together you can transform the business strategically. Improve your tech literacy, and again, do that through team, organization, individual, and leadership. Have a look at the literacy in the organization and see how you can improve yourself and take the organization along a journey. Have a look at your digital transformation skills, the foundational ones that we talked about. Be very clear on your ethics and your personal values around technology and what it means. And maybe reflect on, perhaps if you've got children, an example of what your philosophy is around introducing them to things like VR. You know, there's there's kids in my daughter's class that that spend hours a week in virtual reality, and I would not feel comfortable right now with my daughter, who's 6 years old, donning a VR headset. Yeah, and I think you need to be very clear as to why that's the case, and what your personal philosophy is around that, and then how that injects into your company's philosophy. A good exercise to kind of get your relationship with IT flourishing is to do a connectivity map. I have talked about this in previous presentations, so I can send you resources on what to do, but fundamentally, geographically locate your high-risk tasks in your organization, go and get your mobile phone and run a speed test. So literally speedtest.net, click the button, see whether or not you get connectivity. If you have no connectivity, so a black spot at the same place that you have value at risk, so fatal risks, then you are not able to affect real-time risk management. That's a great visual tool to present back to your organization to say, look, how are we going to actually transform and use the technologies that we're investing and looking at if we can't actually connect them to the internet and get that data? From there, and this is where I think a lot of people have jumped straight to, is just doing a technology pilot. So they've gone to a conference, they've watched a few webinars, they've seen a sensor, wearable sensor technology, they've seen an application of some description, and they've gone, we're going to try that, let's rock and roll, let's do it, but there's been no strategic direction to that. So a strategic tech pilot means that you know what you're going to do with you know what you're going to do. You're preempting that it's successful, number one, because you're going to design the solution well. You've documented the requirements of the solution, you've tested against those requirements, and you either have a positive or a negative. If it's a negative, you can either go back to the tech vendor and iterate, or you can say, it's not for us, we're not at the right time, we'll look at it at another time in the future, or we are ready to scale this across our organization to step change value. What I'm seeing is people pilot, and then they don't know how to get out of pilot mode because they were not strategic about what's next. That comes down to your readiness. So are you ready to move to the next step? And if you're not, is it appropriate to pilot? I would question that. So maybe you need to get the readiness amped up before you can go and do your pilot, so that when you finish your pilot, you can actually leverage the benefits. And that is what I call a digital safety strategy. So that really is all I wanted to cover today. But before I hand over to Q&A, I'd like to give you some resources of where to start. So one resource is me, and I'm more than happy to field your questions on LinkedIn through direct messages and get back to you to the best of my ability. I was providing coaching, but I am totally packed with projects and a couple of coaching things that I just don't have the capacity right now, but I can certainly direct you to the right people. But if you want to do some reading and you want to look at some resources to start with, pardon the aeroplane moving overhead, hopefully you can still hear me. The National Safety Council Work to Zero webpage is a great place to start. So pop there, they have some really interesting webinars. The Safety Tech Accelerator is also an excellent resource. It's a partnership with Lloyd's Register and a Lloyd's Register Foundation. They have the ability to invest in technologies to drive them forward. They are also in a partnership with the NSC to look at a Working at Heights initiative right now. So really interesting collaboration. And the third collaboration between NSC, Safety Tech Accelerator, and DuPont Sustainable Solutions is the safetytech.ai website, which is effectively a technology catalog. Now I've got an asterisk there because it's probably a little bit opportunistic. Sorry to anyone from DSS that's listening along. It's a bit of a dump of all technologies that maybe have the ability to kind of consider themselves as safety tech. And when you scratch the surface and you look into them, they're not actually that mature, some of them. Some of them are amazing, some of them are horrible. So I don't think it's overly helpful for those that are starting off to know, because how are you supposed to know? And I don't personally believe that that's been curated. It's a bit of an opportunistic data dump of everything. And I think that curation is really important in safety tech because it is such a confusing place. probably the best resource to start with is the 2019 World Safety Day resources. So that was the future of work theme. So it was the World Day for Safety and Health at Work, and pre-pandemic. So it was an appropriate time to be looking at what was going on. And I think if people leveraged the benefits of that World Safety Day and actually went on with that, they may have been less disrupted by the pandemic, because likely would have been more prepared, technology-wise anyway. But the World Safety Day resources has two key resources. One is a foundational resource about the future of work and emerging technologies and how they impact work. And because it's by the International Labour Organization, it also has a really balanced view of the risks around inequality and bias in systems, and it's a great foundational resource. So go have a look at just Google it, find the page, download the resources. There's two. One is just the general overview document. The second is a series of thought leadership articles, and they're really, really interesting and a great place to go with excellent viewpoints. So start there. And in yellow with bold, big exclamation point letters is a new initiative that I have started, which is a weekly newsletter showcasing everything that's coming into my feed around safety technology. It's a LinkedIn article. I don't meet the threshold for having enough followers on LinkedIn to get it as a newsletter. Hopefully one day that will happen and I can make it a newsletter. So if you scan the QR code at the bottom, you can help boost my followers by following along, and maybe I will be able to produce it as a proper newsletter. But for now, it is a weekly newsletter that wraps up everything that's happened in safety tech in a week. And it's phenomenal how much is going on. So that one, I curate what's been happening, what's available, but it's quite broad brush. And watch this space for some interesting collaboration coming out next year with a familiar face that you may know in the podcast world, and we'll see if that collaboration comes to fruition to help you further with your safety tech journey. If you're interested in agile mindset, go have a look at any article from Stephen Denning. So Stephen with a PH, Denning, and Linda Holbesch. So they're excellent articles around agile, and there's actually a difference between agile and agility, but let you academically pull that apart and have a look. And as far, as much as the consultants like to show pony what's going on, McKinsey is actually a very good resource. They have an agility series, an agile series. So again, Google McKinsey Agile. There's a whole bunch of resources around that, a digital transformation series and an agility series. It is a really good foundational place to start for agile mindset. So that's it for me. Let's pop to some Q&A. Hopefully you learned something today. Hopefully you've got a steer in a direction about how you can improve your safety technology journey and your digital safety strategy for 2022 and beyond. Over to you, Ram.
Thanks, Cam. That was great. Do we have any questions at all for Cameron? Let's give everyone a moment just to populate it. You can put it either into the Q&A box or the chat box.
Come on, team.
So we've got one from Lauren. So is there a safety tech roundtable type of group, Cameron?
Yes, there is actually. I heard it's being led by Lauren Gilroy from Anglo. I think she's starting the group. No, there isn't, unfortunately, but there are some amazing people out there that I think we should get together. I've seen Andrew Barrett pull together the COVID-19 collaboration roundtable, and we have done. There was I led a thing called the Vanguard back in Sydney when I was there with a group that we looked at. It's been tried and failed a few times, but I think there's more of a critical mass now. I mean, Nicole Copeland from Wood's doing some awesome stuff around agile. I mentioned Sarah Cascadden before, and the whole Amazon team are doing really, really cool stuff. and obviously Lauren with your remit. There's the vendors that are not just there to milk you for trying to get subscriptions. There's people like David Irvine, who's currently on the call, genuinely interested in wanting to shift the dial. There's people like that I'm sure would love to join. We've got the tech companies that are available to kind of get in as well. I think that it's probably the right time, Lauren, to get something together. How that looks, we'll see. Maybe the next step can help get a bit of a leadership group together.
Next question. So from a horizon scanning point of view, what is the most exciting development you're seeing in the safety tech space?
Great question, Luke. So it depends on how, so if I'm looking at horizon, my horizon's probably a little bit different to other people's horizon. So artificial general intelligence, so the ability for humanoid artificial intelligence to be able to work alongside us and give us meaningful insights is equal parts scary and amazing. And for those that are deep into AI, I believe there are some really, really exciting things going on. Short term, I think we'll set with shorter term, I think we may see some of this hype of the metaverse transform into how we collaborate virtually and how we transform learning in an organization, particularly with distributed workforce. So I believe there's probably going to be some interesting developments around how we virtually collaborate and then how we manage safety as a virtual representation of ourselves. And I think right now it's kind of like mind-bending conversations, and I think that's where we need to start looking. But when the biggest, most exciting development to enable safety technology, I think, is the Starlink satellite program. So I think once we start seeing connectivity available everywhere, then we can start to leverage everything. Because what's holding us back is that this book here is a good one, actually, to have a look at. So Deep Tech by Eric Redmond. I don't know if this is going to, so it's demystifying the breakthrough technologies that will revolutionize everything. It goes over the emerging trends. That's a good book to kind of give you a forecast on the horizon. But yeah, I think metaverse / AI, humanoid robots with general intelligence, that's just going to, we are going to become partnered. So human machine teaming. I think I'd love to see that AI robots managing traffic on the back of recent traffic controller fatality. I think we will start to see far more human machine teaming. So there's a great example of human machine teaming with a company called Chironics. They're an Australian company who've just won a US Navy contract. And that's where robots work with humans to do really interesting things. Short-term horizon scanning as well. Anything with a camera that you can run an AI algorithm across to give you real-time insights. Again, game-changing stuff that we just haven't had access to as safety professionals in the past.
Thank you, Cam. We've got a good question here from Tynan. So how much is the digital maturity of businesses now factoring into how we measure safety climate or culture measurement for businesses?
So I don't think we've, so unfortunately what we're doing is we're just doing like a digital version of the paper. I think if you look at what David Proven's doing with ThoughtWorks and the Safety Futures program, that's probably the most aligned, like the most set up to be able to do an assessment around climate, culture, and digital. And Peter Westbrook, I think he's with Toll, great mind, safety leader. He has asked the question on LinkedIn this week, actually. There's an innovation management standard, and then you've got the safety standard. And then within that, you've got leadership and culture and trust. And if you were going to design a management system that included digital transformation and safety through those two management system standards, and then had all of your policy and then all of your assessment of leadership and then your culture that comes out of that and the ability to accept change. I think we're going to start to see more people realizing that you can't separate digital transformation and safety. I don't know if I answered that question very well. I'm going to read it. How much of the digital maturity of businesses is now factoring to health? They're not. So I don't believe that we're seeing organizations factor that in, but I believe that we should. And I think one of the ways to do it is by amalgamating. If you're a standards-driven organization, an ISO standards-driven organization, if you amalgamate ISO 45003, so psychological health and safety, with traditional 45001, plus then you're looking at the standard for cybersecurity and the standard for digital transformation, then maybe because we've got an integrated framework, just like when we first started integrating quality, environment, and safety as an integrated management system, I think we start broadening that out to more things. We may see some of that improve. Great questions, everybody.
No, they are great questions. And whilst we're talking as well, David Irvine has kindly offered. So David Smith or I would be happy to support or contribute to the roundtable type discussion if you get that up and going. I think that is it in terms of questions. But if there is any more, Cameron, as you said, feel free to reach out to yourself.
Yeah, there's one I think that's coming. So from James, I'm going to read it out. Coming from an industry and organisation whose traditional understanding of digital transformation was moving from fax to email, I'd love to know, have you seen a common successful entry point that helped, i.e. VR, AI, VR wearable, that has helped create a successful value proposition for tech investment? I'm biased here, and it actually is the reason why I work for the company that I work for. And I'll give you an example. So if I want to say to you, okay, digital transformation is basically taking your paper Take 5 checklists or your paper incident investigation process and putting it into a database. And maybe our vendor enables me to capture it on my phone. So I can go and capture the same data I did on paper, but now I do it on my phone. That is one thing. Then I go to an organization and I say, hey, I want you to wear this. Now, getting someone to transfer something from paper to a digital format is not, in my view, transformation. That is shifting a methodology of capturing data from one way to another. When you ask someone to wear a camera on their head, and the reason why you want them to do that is to capture real-time insights so that you can potentially understand work as done versus work as imagined, and then be able to inform your health and safety strategy. You are asking them to physically walk around looking a bit like a robot, and you're asking them to wear a camera, and you're asking them to record their workplace, and you're saying to them that you're going to start drawing insights, and maybe you're going to go and get a computer, an artificial intelligence, to tell you whether or not there's some information that you could potentially use to improve. That is absolutely frightening for organizations that are fax to spreadsheet. So yes, I'm biased, and no, I'm not trying to flog this, but what I love about working day in and day out with organizations that are trying this is what it enables them to do is really clearly understand what are the change barriers to be effective. So something that's quite visual and visceral and in your face, to me, is a really great litmus test for where you're at. Now, there's a danger for doing that in an organization that's really observing and nowhere near ready. So there's a sweet spot time, and that's kind of what I've talked about today, is like understand your readiness and get yourself going, and then nurture. So you might actually not be able to implement a actual technology, like a thing that physically changes the way that work is done, until maybe 2023, 2024, if you're like way down the list, way down the maturity ranks. Just like you're not going to be able to go and do these quite conceptually fabulous differences in safety management theory. You can't all of a sudden become a new view safety flourishing organization if you don't have a pathway to get where you think you want to get to. So it's a similar thing. Great question. All right.
I think that is it. So great feedback, obviously, Cam, regarding the session. So Cameron, on behalf of everyone that's attended today, thank you again for another really thought-provoking discussion.